America's first domestically designed tank was not the Renault FT copy that every history remembers. It was the Ford 3-ton, built from scratch by Ford engineers in 1918 and reaching production faster than any armored vehicle in American history to that point. Ford built 15,000 before the armistice ended the order. It never saw combat, so it was written out of the history that credited the borrowed French design with teaching American crews armored warfare. The first American tank sat in warehouses, while the borrowed one got the credit. An American-built copy of the French Renault FT, the M1917, equipped the first American tank units and was operated by the crews who developed every doctrine American armor would use in the next war. It is remembered as derivative and obsolete, which it was by 1940. But the men who trained on it, including George Patton, developed in those cramped two-man hulls the principles of crew coordination and infantry support that made American armor effective in World War II. The tank that taught America how to fight from a turret. Before the Sherman existed, there was the M2 Medium, and the Sherman could not have existed without it. The M2 established the hull geometry and mechanical architecture. The M3 Lee and M4 Sherman both inherited directly. It was obsolete before combat. None were ever committed to battle. The engineers who designed the Sherman started from the M2 and scaled up. Every American medium tank in World War II descends from a machine that never fired a shot in anger. The first American tank to fight in every theater of World War II, the M3 Stuart reached Allied armies in numbers that mattered before American production had ramped up. She is remembered as lightly armed and eventually outclassed, which is accurate. But the crews fighting in her in 1941 and 1942 had a vehicle that was mechanically reliable, fast, and available when reliable, fast, and available defined the difference between an armored force and a motorized one. She showed up. That mattered more than the gun. 20 M26 Pershings reached Europe in time to fight in the Rhineland campaign. 20. The tank matched the Panther in armor and outperformed the Tiger in reliability. It had been in production since 1944 and held back from Europe for more than a year by commanders who believed the Sherman was adequate. The tank that matched German heavy armor had been sitting in American depots since mid-1944, while crews died in Shermans. The army decided the war did not need it. The crews had a different opinion. Every criticism of the Sherman, undergunned, under-armored, prone to burning, describes the early M4. It does not describe the M4A3E8 that American tankers were fighting in by late 1944, which had a 76mm gun defeating most German armor at combat ranges, an improved suspension with soft ground mobility advantages, and wet ammunition stowage that had largely eliminated the fire risk. The EZ-8 that fought in Korea was not the tank that burned in Normandy. The reputation was earned by a vehicle substantially improved before the reputation stuck. The M36 was the only American turreted vehicle capable of reliably defeating Panther and Tiger frontal armor at combat ranges, a capability the 75mm Sherman did not have, and the 76mm Sherman only partially provided. The M36 Jackson is virtually absent from popular accounts of the European tank war, despite being the vehicle specifically deployed when American forces needed to kill heavy German armor. It fought in Korea and was still operational with Serbian forces in the 1990s. The tank that could kill tigers is not in the movies. 50 miles per hour on roads, faster than any German tank could match, and the advantage M18 Hellcat crews used to compensate for armor too light for standing engagements against heavy German tanks. Its 76mm gun defeated German medium armor frontally. Its speed let it choose the engagement. The M18's kill ratio in the European theater exceeded the Sherman's. It is remembered as an underpowered tank destroyer on a flawed doctrine. Its kill numbers suggest a more complicated assessment. Tank destroyer doctrine is universally derided, and the M10 Wolverine tends to get dismissed alongside it. The doctrine was wrong. The vehicle was effective. Its 3-inch gun defeated the Panzer IV frontally at combat ranges and the Panther from the side. It was faster than the Sherman on roads, and its open-topped turret gave the crew situational awareness superior to almost any closed vehicle in theater. Tank destroyer doctrine failed because of how the Army chose to use M10s. The M10 itself consistently performed the task it was given. The M24 Chaffee arrived in late 1944, too late and too few to define its World War II reputation. In Korea, it was initially the only American tank available when North Korean T-34s crossed the 38th parallel. The crews who fought T-34s in M24s did so knowing they were outgunned, out-armored, and outweighed. They bought time anyway. The M24 is remembered as the light tank that lost to the T-34. It is less often remembered as the light tank that held the line long enough for something heavier to arrive. While arguments about the Sherman's 75mm versus 76mm gun against German armor have filled decades of tank history, the 105mm howitzer variant performed a mission those arguments entirely ignore. The M4A3-105 provided direct-fire high-explosive support that infantry commanders consistently rated more valuable day-to-day than tank-on-tank engagements, which were relatively rare. Most Sherman rounds in Northwest Europe were fired at infantry, bunkers, and fortifications, not panzers. The variant optimized for the job the Sherman actually did most of the time is absent from debates about whether the Sherman was good enough. Overshadowed by the M4 before it and the M48 after, the M46 Patton is the most overlooked tank of the Korean War. It was the first American tank in Korea capable of fighting the T-34/85 on approximately equal terms, and it fought in every major armored engagement of the war's second and third years. The M46 introduced the AV-1790 engine and Allison cross-drive transmission that became standard in American armor for the next 30 years. The tank that modernized American armor is remembered mainly as a stepping stone. A 90mm gun on a tracked chassis light enough to be delivered by parachute, the M56 Scorpion gave airborne infantry an anti-tank capability they could bring with them on the drop. It was airdropped in exercises, used in Vietnam, and performed the mission a 90mm gun performs when it reaches the right position. The M56 is absent from almost every account of American Cold War armor because it was classified as self-propelled artillery rather than a tank. The classification obscured what it actually was: a gun that went wherever infantry went. Conventional Vietnam War history has almost no room for tanks, which is accurate for the strategic narrative and misleading about how American ground operations actually worked. The M48A3 Patton was present from 1965 to 1972, fought at Hue City, and was credited by Marine and Army commanders as one of the most effective direct-fire platforms available to infantry in jungle and urban terrain. The tank, absent from most Vietnam War histories, was present at most of its significant ground battles. The absence is in the history, not in the field. The M551 Sheridan is remembered almost exclusively for its failures. Combustible cartridge casings, an underperforming missile system, an aluminium hull vulnerable to mines. The failures were real. The Sheridan was the only American armored vehicle that could be parachute dropped, the only one that could fire a missile, and the only one with the 82nd Airborne at every deployment from Vietnam through Desert Storm. It did what no other American tank could do. The things it could not do received all the attention. Its 175mm gun reached 32 kilometers, the longest range tube artillery piece in the American infantry for most of its service life. At Khe Sanh in 1968, M107s provided counter-battery fire against North Vietnamese artillery positioned beyond the range of every other American weapon in the theater. Marines under siege depended on a platform most histories of that battle never name. The gun that reached farther than anything else the Army owned is not in the documentaries about the war it spent years fighting. 49,000 Shermans, approximately 8,000 Panthers, 1,400 Tigers across all variants. American planners chose adequate tanks in overwhelming numbers over superior tanks in insufficient ones. The strategy worked. The Sherman is remembered as the tank that lost individual engagements to the Panther and Tiger. It is less often remembered as the tank whose production numbers made individual engagements irrelevant to the final result. Industrial capacity was the weapon. The Sherman was the delivery system. The argument about the gun missed the point. The M60A1 Rise passive replaced active infrared sights, which required the tank to illuminate its own targets, revealing its position, with passive night vision that let the crew see in darkness without emitting anything. The technology became baseline on the M1 Abrams and standard on every American tank since. The M60 variant that introduced night fighting as a routine tank capability is remembered as the tank the M1 replaced. The capability it introduced is in every tank that followed. When the M1 Abrams is credited with the Gulf War's one-sided tank battles, the M60A3 units in Saudi and Egyptian service alongside it are absent from the analysis. With laser rangefinder, thermal sight, and solid-shot ammunition, it was not the Vietnam-era tank American planners had declared obsolete. Egyptian M60A3s destroyed Iraqi armor at ranges matching the M1's performance. The tank the Army had written off performed at a standard the write-off had not anticipated. The M1 got the credit. The M60A3 got the same kills. Not a tank. Never classified as a tank. Destroyed more Iraqi armored vehicles in the Gulf War than the M1 Abrams did. The Bradley's 25mm chain gun and tow missiles proved devastatingly effective against the BMP infantry vehicles and T-55s that comprised the bulk of Iraqi armored strength, at ranges the Iraqi vehicles could not reciprocate. The vehicle that outscored the Abrams in armored kills is classified as an infantry fighting vehicle, and therefore absent from most assessments of American tank performance in that conflict. The category determined the credit. Universally celebrated, the M1 Abrams in the Gulf War is rarely distinguished by variant. The original M1 had a 105mm gun and conventional steel armor. The M1A1 that destroyed the Republican Guard had a 120mm smoothbore, depleted uranium armor, and ammunition defeating any tank at over 2 kilometers. Armor no Iraqi weapon could penetrate. The Gulf War was not won by the M1. It was won by the M1A1, a substantially different machine that shares the name with the version that preceded it. When M3 Bradley scouts found Iraqi armor in the Gulf War, they did not break contact and report. They engaged at ranges the Iraqi vehicles could not match and decided the outcome themselves. The M3 CFV changed armed reconnaissance from observation to a capability that could determine the outcome of the contact it was sent to find. The vehicle that redefined how the Army scouts for the enemy is described in most references as a variant of the Bradley. It deserves a separate entry. The M109 self-propelled howitzer entered service in 1963 and is still in production more than 60 years later, a service life exceeding every other American armored vehicle in history. Its A6 Paladin variant, fielded in 1992, reduced time from mission receipt to first round to under 60 seconds through automated gun laying and onboard digital fire control. The M109 and its variants have fired more rounds in combat than any other American armored vehicle since World War II, in the armies of more than 30 nations. It is classified as artillery. Fewer people read the artillery histories. No external inspection reveals the difference between an M1A2 and an M1A2 SEP, but the inter-vehicle information system and digital management allowing an entire battalion to share position, target, and threat data in real time are not cosmetic. In the 2003 invasion of Iraq, M1A2 SEP battalions executed movements at a tempo previous doctrine had considered impossible. The upgrade that transformed the Abrams from a powerful individual vehicle into a networked system is invisible from the outside and rarely discussed in accounts that focus on the gun. Every engineering decision that makes the Abrams lineage possible — turbine engine, Chobham-derived composite armor, stabilized gun, blowout panel separating ammunition from crew — was present in the 1980 M1 with its 105mm gun. That vehicle never fought a major war. Every subsequent American main battle tank and every Allied design studying the Abrams drew from a template whose original version is remembered mainly as the one before the version that fought. The tank that established modern armor design is credited for less than the wars it made possible. American engineers developed the M4A2 Sherman specifically for Lend-Lease delivery to the Soviet Union, and Soviet tankers received more than 4,000 of them, nearly a tenth of total Sherman production. Soviet crews fighting from Kursk to Berlin rated the M4A2 reliability and crew habitability well above the T-34, and Soviet after-action assessments documented the type's performance in detail. The Sherman variant that fought the Eastern Front in Soviet hands is absent from almost every Western account of the tank's combat history. Americans built it, Russians fought in it. Neither history fully claims it. Egypt still operates more than 1,000 M60A3 tanks. Saudi Arabia still operates hundreds. Israel fielded Patton variants in the 1982 Lebanon War and beyond. The M60, the United States Army retired in the early 1990s, remains primary armor for multiple Allied militaries 3 decades later. A tank declared obsolete by the army that built it has outlasted the doctrine that replaced it in the inventories of nations that kept faith with the design. The M60 was finished in American service. Everywhere else, it kept going. Every original design decision of the 1980 M1 Abrams — turbine engine, blowout panels, composite armor, crew compartment layout — remains structurally present in the M1A2C fighting today, alongside an auxiliary power unit, third-generation commander's thermal sight, and underbelly armor developed from IED experience in Iraq. 4 decades of combat lessons carried in a hull whose basic architecture has not been replaced, only deepened. The design was right the first time. The wars proved it.